let's dive in. You're reporting on the timeline, TikTok, of the Falcons deciding to bench Kirk Cousins and put Michael Penix in a spot we've never really seen a first overall quarterback, let alone any rookie quarterback, placed. Tom?
Well, going back to even a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this on game day morning, it was very unlikely at that point that the Falcons were going to bench Kirk Cousins at any point during the 2024 season. That was not the intention. Obviously, when they signed him, it was not the intention when they drafted Michael Penix Jr., but it also was not the intention for Kirk Cousins to be going through one of the roughest stretches of his career on a team that right now is seeing what at one point looked like a certain playoff appearance now becomes something where they need some help here. With Cousins, everybody's looking at the last 5 games. I understand that's kind of where the numbers are. It's really been the last 3 games. There was the game in Denver where he just didn't play well, and I think that was the 4 interception game, if I remember correctly. Then there was the game in Minnesota, which was just kind of all over the place, and that was the first time I had seen Cousins play live this season, and he wasn't, bad from start to finish. It was better than the week before, but it was just off. It wasn't quite right. And then obviously, on Monday Night Football, they didn't play well as a team. Cousins didn't play well. I was struck by just watching the highlights, Rich, and I'm not an expert in quarterback play, but Cousins' greatest skill has always been dropping back, see it, and rip it. He's been an elite processor. Never had the biggest arm, never been the biggest guy, the most mobile guy, but he could see it and throw. And the number of times when you watch the highlights or lowlights from that game where he's patting the ball 3 times, where he's taking a step left and then kind of throwing back right, it just looks like his superpower, which is his brain, isn't quite overcoming some of the other things that have been the limitations through his career. He's less mobile than ever. And when you talk to players on other teams, they bring that up. The arm was never been the biggest, but now, he's been one of the most accurate downfield quarterbacks. Now that's not there either. And the Falcons were left with a choice here. You can go another 3 games because of the money you're paying Kirk Cousins and because this was the plan, and risk having your locker room looking around going, why is this guy not being held accountable? Or you roll out Michael Penix Jr. and you hope that this guy who played 6 years of college football, albeit with several season-ending injuries in there, is ready to roll. And so it was really coming off of that Monday night game. Even going into that game, they weren't thinking we're definitely going to do this. It just didn't look better. And the moment that Raheem Morris said after the game, we need better play out of the quarterback position, reiterated it the next day, you got that sense that they were going to go to Michael Penix Jr. And this now sets off another chain reaction here, Rich, because Kirk Cousins has fully guaranteed money in 2025. He has a no trade clause. He didn't look good when he played this season. And no matter what ends up happening in terms of where Cousins is playing in 2025, there's pretty significant salary cap ramifications for the Falcons as well.
Well, that's down the road. They've got 3 pretty big games, including one against the Giants. And then if they win that one and the Eagles sweep the Commanders, then the Sunday nighter they just flexed into at NBC for Week 17 would be for a playoff spot between 2 rookie quarterbacks that finished 1-2 in the Heisman last year. I mean, my goodness, this is all in the ether, Tom. So what are you hearing from Atlanta about Penix's readiness? What are you hearing there?
The interesting thing with Michael Penix Jr., you have to remember, Rich, is he's a left-handed quarterback. And so in practice, I actually asked some people about this. How do you run the scout team reps? Because the scout team, you are running the opponent's plays. Presumably, unless you're playing the Dolphins, the opponent has a right-handed quarterback. Basically, what I was told was they run the plays exactly how the opponent would run them, but Penix just throws it as a left-handed quarterback to the same read side. In other words, the protections and things that he's even been dealing with have been sort of flipped from what they would actually look like here. It doesn't necessarily, render those reps invalid, but it's been a little bit of an unusual situation for how he's come along. Everything I've heard has been that he's looked good in practice. He's obviously, he's a bright guy. He's played a lot of football in his life. They don't think that this moment is going to be too big for him, but you're talking about, changing some things up, not just because it's a left-handed QB, but also because his skill set is going to be a little bit different than Kirk Cousins. Penix didn't run very much at all in Washington. I know he did in the playoff game where, they kind of had to because nothing else was working in that game, but he's predominantly been a pocket passer. And so from that aspect, it's going to be similar to what they had with Cousins, but you're probably going to, to change certain things up to best fit the skill set of a guy who this is really the first relevant NFL action we've seen in his career. There's not a lot of times. I mean, you go back through the last 20 years, Rich. I mean, the closest comp I can think of was, the Giants being 5-2 and benching our buddy Kurt Warner for Eli Manning. But even then, that was early enough in the season. This is, hey, the other guy's not hurt. We just think we're going to roll you out there in must-win territory. You're facing a bad Giants team this week. It's an ideal matchup, even though that Giants defense does have some talent. I'm fascinated to see, just because Penix was a guy who was so polarizing in the pre-draft process. There were some coaches I talked to who said, absolutely, I wouldn't want him because of the lack of mobility, because the accuracy kind of comes and goes at times. And there were other people I talked to who had him as, one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the entire draft. We're about to find out, again, small sample size. We're about to find out, at least for year one, who's right.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.